In this video, we'll learn how to track form submissions with the element visibility trigger in Google Tag Manager. In other words, we will track form submissions when a success message appears on the screen. Hey, my name is Julius and welcome to Analytics Mania's YouTube channel, where you can learn Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics the right way. Some forms are just not easy to track. Some of them do not redirect you to a thank you page, they cannot be tracked with the built-in form submission trigger in Google Tag Manager, and even AJAX listener cannot deal with them. So what can we do? Well, if the form displays a success message, we could try to do that, to track that with the element visibility trigger. By the way, if this method doesn't work for you, check the first link in the description of this video, where you will find a very extensive guide on how to track forms with Google Tag Manager. Alright, so let's take a look at how can we configure the element visibility trigger in Google Tag Manager. Now I am on a demo website and my Google Tag Manager container is already added to the code of this website. And what I want to do is that I want to track this form. So whenever someone subscribes to a newsletter, I want to track that as an event and send to Google Analytics. To save you some time, I can tell you that this form cannot be tracked with the form submission trigger, because when I submit the form, there is no form submit event in the preview and debug mode. And also this form has no thank you page. And even this form, it cannot be tracked with the AJAX listener. So what we could do is that we could check whether a success message appears after the form is successfully submitted. I can enter an email, then click sign up now, and I see the success message appear right here. Let's take a look whether this message has some maybe unique class or unique ID. We can do that by doing the right click on that message, then click inspect. And here you will see that this message has a class called thanks. And I think that we are going to use that in our Google Tag Manager container. But first, let's check what kind of trigger are we going to use. So let's go to Google Tag Manager, then triggers, click new, then trigger configuration. And let's take a look what kind of trigger can we use. And for this purpose, the best candidate is the element visibility trigger. This trigger will be activated when an element appears on the screen. So in this case, when a success message appears on the screen, we can configure that trigger, and later we can use that trigger to fire an event and send that event to Google Analytics. So let's go to Google Tag Manager, click the element visibility trigger, and here we're going to do several configurations. First of all, the selection method. There are two options right here, because right now we somehow need to instruct Google Tag Manager that we are interested in a certain element. And we can select that element with an ID or CSS selector. The ID is obviously an easier option, but if we take a look at this element, once I clicked inspect, you see that the element has no ID. Let me just zoom in. It has no ID, neither this element nor, let's say, higher element. We can just see that this is a class. Now, obviously the class is not an ID, therefore this selection method will not work for us. That's why we need to go and choose CSS selector. Now, CSS selectors is a much more complex topic, especially for beginners, but just to save you some time, I can tell you that if we want to select a certain element and that element has a particular class, we can just copy this class and start that class with a dot. Because a CSS selector is basically a pattern that allows us to pick certain elements based on our conditions. And we can do that by following a particular syntax. In case of CSS, a dot means a class. So if we enter dot and then the class name, what we do is that we instruct Google Tag Manager that we are interested in an element that has a class called thanks. Now, one more thing that we need to do is that we need to make sure that there is only one element on a page with this class. Because if we had, let's say, 5 elements on a page with the same class, then we would get a lot of false positives when it comes to form submission tracking. So what we need to do is that we need to copy the entire CSS selector. Then we go to the page, switch to console, and then enter the following command. Document.query selector all, open parentheses, and then enter your CSS selector surrounded by quotation marks. Click it and you will see that once you expand it, the length of this list is 1. So this means that there is only one element on a page that has this class. And that is a good thing, because if we had multiple elements with the same class, we would then need to write a more precise CSS selector. So it looks like our selector is fine. Then the next thing is that we need to choose the minimum % visible in order to track the appearance of that element. So in this case, I usually choose just as little as possible, because what matters to me is just the fact that the element appeared on a page. And finally, since this element appears out of the blue, out of nowhere, I mean, when the visitor interacts with that form, we need to enable this checkbox, which is called Observe DOM Changes. In a nutshell, this checkbox enables a feature that tracks the appearance of elements when those elements appear just out of nowhere. Because if an element appears after scrolling, this checkbox is not needed. But if you want to track an element that just pops up on the screen, then keep this checkbox enabled. Now let's name the trigger. And let's test whether it is working properly. First of all, enable the preview and debug mode by clicking this button or refresh it. Then let's refresh the demo page, or I mean, if you're working on your website, then you should refresh your website. I will just quickly close the console and let's submit the form once again. And I see the success message appear on the screen. And also I see a new event in the preview mode, which is called element visibility. If I click it, I can see various points about that element. For example, here is the class of an element that appeared on the screen. So if you see this event in the preview and debug mode, that's a good thing. And now we can proceed to the next step, which is a GA tag. We want to send an event to Google Analytics when this success message appears on the screen. So this means that the form was submitted successfully. So let's go to Google Tag Manager, go to tags, then click New, Tag Configuration, Universal Analytics, then choose track type event, and then let's fill in the category, action, and label. Label is optional. So in the category, we can enter form submission, and in the action, we can enter, let's say, newsletter, because when that form is submitted, a visitor subscribes to a newsletter. So we can enter here like this. And in this case, I will leave the label empty. I haven't inserted any variables because this particular trigger that we have just created, it is designed just for that one form. Then in this field, I will choose the G settings variable. If you haven't created this variable yet, I will post a link below this video to a guide where you can learn more. But now I presume that you have already at least one G settings variable in your container. And then in the triggering, let's choose the visibility trigger that we have just created. Finally, let's name the tag. And let's click Save. And now we must test our setup and check whether everything is working properly. So first of all, refresh the preview mode, then refresh the page. And let's submit the form once again. I see the element visibility event appear right here. My tag has fired. If I click it, I can also check what kind of values were sent. For example, category form submission and action is newsletter. Now I need to go to Google Analytics and check the real-time reports. So let's go to real-time and events. And you will see that the event was properly sent and received by Google Analytics. And here is the event category, here is the event action. And after a while, you will be able to see that data in your standard reports as well. You can do that by going to behavior, events, overview, or top events, and you will see that event right here. But right now, I'm not going to show that because not enough time has passed. And that's how you track form submissions with the element visibility trigger in Google Tag Manager. If you found this video useful, hit the like button because it helps me continue working on this channel. And if you want to learn more about Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics, consider subscribing. And a quick reminder is that if this method didn't work for you, check the first link in the description of this video, where you will find a very extensive guide on how to track forms with Google Tag Manager. And that's the end of this tutorial. My name is Julius. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.